Good morning! I'm saying good morning to you today from under the sea. Okay, not really, I'm just using a green screen, but it seems like I'm from under the sea, and the way that I set up the setting totally changed the way you were thinking about where I was and what I was doing. That's because the background, the setting, is a really important part of telling a story, whether it's in a movie or in a written book. Which is why, of course, when you're watching a movie, you pay attention not just to the characters, but all the stuff that's going on around them. And it's the same thing with a story. If you are a good author, you're going to be describing your setting in a lot of detail to help the readers not just imagine what's going on with the characters, but everything else that's going on in the scene. If you leave out the background, you're leaving out half of what's going on. So when you're writing your hero story, you need to make sure that you're describing your setting as well. Let's take a look at a few settings and see how we can imagine them. The authors use description to help you imagine what's going on. When they're describing setting, they are describing what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it feels like. They are activating all of your senses so that you can imagine what's going on. What does it smell like under the sea? Oh, you can smell the fishy smell of of all the underwater creatures, and you can taste the salt water as it leaks in a little bit through your snorkel, and you can feel the slimy scales of the fish as they brush past you and swim under your arms and your legs, and you can feel the waves of the water pushing against you very gently, and you can see the bubbles and hear the bubbles bubbling up gently to the top. Okay, so I've described that setting pretty well, I think. Let's imagine ourselves in a different location. Now we're in a train station. What do you hear when you're in a train station? You could hear the brakes and the squeak of the brakes as the trains come to a grinding halt. And you can smell the garbage because somebody hasn't emptied the garbage container recently, and so that very strong smell of garbage, and hopefully the janitor will come and clean up the train station soon. And you can taste, maybe they're selling pastries in the train station, because a lot of train stations will sell sweet or savory pastries, and maybe you're buying some and tasting it in your mouth. And maybe you're feeling people push against you as they rush to the train, that they don't really care that you're in the way, they just push you out of the way. And maybe you can hear the clip-clop of shoes as people run to their trains. There's a lot of stuff that you can imagine with your senses in a train station. Okay, let's go to one more place. The desert. What can you feel in the desert? Oh, you can feel the hot, dry air shriveling you up like a raisin. And you can smell I don't know what the smell of the desert is, but I know because I went to a desert, but I'm not sure how to describe it. But you can smell it's an ancient smell, like the surroundings are so old, they're as old as the earth itself. And you can feel the hot air as it pushes sand against your face, and you can hear that too, all the rustling of the wind, and you can see the bright sun scorching the holes into your eyes because of how bright it is. And you can't really taste very much because it's a desert and there's not much to eat there. But you get the idea, right? Hopefully you're not tasting sand, although that might very well happen when the wind blows sand into your mouth. So these descriptions help us imagine the setting. And today, you are going to be making sure that you think of all the settings in your story, and hopefully there's more than one, and thinking of all the descriptions that you can make for your setting. Before we do that, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show you how we can look at a film and imagine what's going on in the setting there, and then I'm going to show you how we can fill in the setting description planning sheet so that you can make your own when the time comes for that. So let's start by taking a look at a film and see if we can identify descriptions that we can make. How can we describe what we're hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, feeling? Now, obviously, when you're watching the film, you're not going to be tasting anything. That's why you need to use your imagination for some of the things like feel, taste, smell, right? So we're going to watch the film, and let's see if we can figure out what are the different senses that we can sense. and then we'll take a look at how to fill in the planning sheet. Let's see that film.
Before we watch the video, what I want you to do is find a piece of paper and divide it into 6 equal parts. You can divide it either with a ruler and pencil, or you can just fold it. Then each part gets a different label except for the one in the bottom right-hand corner, because you only need 5 labels. And the labels are see, hear, touch, smell, and taste. Now when you watch the video, I want you to try and find one description for each of those senses from what you were observing in the video. So, for some of the things like see and hear, you can actually just write what you see and hear. With smell, touch, and taste, you're going to have to use your imagination just a little bit. Let's watch that video. Well, that was pretty funny. Let's take a look at what you wrote for your different senses. Here's what I wrote. This is what I imagined seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. And you can see that I have different parts of it underlined, highlighted, or slightly slanted. The words that are underlined are adjectives. They're words that tell you what something is like. The words that are slanted are nouns. Those are people, places, or things. And the words that are highlighted are verbs. Those are action words. If you are writing really clearly about your setting, you should have all 3, adjectives, nouns, and verbs. Let's take a look at mine. When I was watching the movie, I could see the emerald grass springing cheerfully out of the ground. I could hear the peaceful stream flowing through the meadow. I could feel the gentle sunlight warming my cheek. I could smell the sweet aroma of the flowers dancing in my nostrils. And I could taste the tart juice of the crunchy apple swishing around in my mouth. So you can see I included adjectives, nouns, and verbs for each of those. That's right, I'm going to be asking you to plan your own setting descriptions. But before you do that, I want you to see how I would plan mine. This is the Sensing Your Setting document that you'll be using to plan your setting descriptions for your story, and I'm going to show you how to use it. So the idea is to choose your settings and then describe them using the 5 senses. I'm going to use the example of the story I told you on Friday about the superhero rescuing the neighborhood from slipping on banana peels. So let's describe the setting. It was, I don't know, outside on the sidewalk. Great. What could you see? Well, I remember that it's just the beginning of spring and the grass was not exactly green, so I might write something like brown grass still sleeping after a long winter. What could you hear? Well, it was a silent film, so not much of anything. But you could write something like, the streets were silent as everyone hid from the banana littering villain. You couldn't hear anything because everyone was gone hiding from the villain. What could you feel? Well, if you're standing on the sidewalk, you'd probably feel the sidewalk. So something like the hard pavement pushing against your shoes. And if you were walking barefoot, that would be an even better description. And if you were walking barefoot, it would be an even better description about the hard pavement scraping against your feet or something like that. But I remember that my villain was definitely wearing shoes. Anyways, what could you smell? Oh, how about the rotten banana peel turning brown on the ground? And what might you taste? The air thick with fear coats your tongue with a bitter taste. There we go. Now I've described the setting using all 5 senses, and that's exactly what you're going to do.
Now that you've seen me plan the descriptions for my setting, it's time for you to plan the descriptions for yours. Download the description planning template and figure out how you're going to describe each of the settings in your story. And then, when you're writing your story, make sure that you fit all of those descriptions in as much as you can. I can't wait to see how you go from planning to implementing those descriptions in your actual writing.